sixth graders, it's Mr. Gardell. How are you on this glorious day? I hope you're doing well. I know I'm having a great day. All right, we are going to start today with another joke by Mr. Gardell. Here we go. Why did the teacher have to wear sunglasses? Why did the teacher have to wear sunglasses? I'll give you 5 seconds to think of your response. All right, time is up. Who got it correct? Raise your hand if you have the answer. All right, what do you think? Nope, that's incorrect. And I'll call on another student. And what do you think? That too is incorrect. All right, I'll just give the answer. So, why did the teacher have to wear sunglasses? Because the students were so bright. Oh, what a great joke. Another hilarious joke by Mr. Gardell. You're welcome. You're welcome. You're welcome. I know you're thanking me right now, so you're very welcome. All right. So I intentionally put this painting up for us to look at because that was a recent learning activity for you to complete. Specifically, you were asked to not only analyze this painting, but think about these questions. Question 1. Where are these steamboats filled with people going and why? And where did these people come from? And so the first question is, where are they going? So steamboats were an excellent mode of transportation for immigrants and settlers to get to the lands of Minnesota. Why? Because they could transport so many people at one time, unlike smaller modes of transportation like an ox cart, for example, or even a canoe. So steamboats were really the choice and the mode of transportation for most, as many of these individuals, these settlers and immigrants, were traveling from far, far places. Some, came to the lands of Minnesota from the eastern part of the United States or other parts of the United States of America. Some came as far away from as Europe, like countries, for example, like Germany. And so, really, it was the steamboat that was their mode of transportation to get them to the lands of Minnesota. You also were asked to think and complete, really, the Chapter 7 vocabulary. And I just want to go through those terms for you and provide you some examples of sentences that I came up with the groupings of terms that you should have completed by now. So let's first start, my apologies, with the terms themselves. Okay, so by now you know that we have started a new chapter. This chapter is called Minnesota's Newcomers. Newcomers meaning the settlers that were coming to Minnesota. What would entice them, to come to Minnesota or the lands of Minnesota? And these immigrants that were coming from far, far, far away lands like the continent of Europe, as I stated already, like the country of Germany. And so what would entice these people, whether they're coming from the US or far places such as the continent of Europe, what would want them to come to the lands of Minnesota? What would attract them to come here? So the first term that you were to define is a steamboat. Again, a boat powered by a steam engine. Steamboats were the main mode of travel for newcomers moving to Minnesota during the territorial period. And what the territorial period means is when Minnesota was a territory from 1849 to 1858. In 1858, specifically May 11th, Minnesota became a state. U.S. Congress is similarly set up then as it was to today. So it's basically a group of people who make laws for the United States. U.S. Congress is made up of two parts or groups, the Senate and the House of Representatives. These groups of individuals really are the lawmakers, okay? They're part of the legislative branch. So whenever I think of the legislative branch, I think of lawmakers, LL. That's how I remember what lawmakers or legislative branch or the Senate and House of Representatives do. All right, moving on. Governor. So the head of the executive branch in a state or territory is known as the governor. The first territorial governor in 1849 was Mr. Alexander Ramsey. The first state governor in 1858 was Henry Hastings Sibley. That was his middle name. Believe it or not, Alexander Ramsey became the second state governor of Minnesota. State is simply just a geographic area with boundaries, residents, and a government with a constitution and laws. And so Minnesota had to go through a process, not only to become a territory in 1849, but also to become a state in 1858. We will learn more about that in the days to come. An immigrant is simply an individual or person who comes into a country to live there. Okay. For example, my great grandmother came to the United States of America in the early-ish 1900s from Germany. And so she immigrated to the United States and she ended up living the rest of her life here in Minnesota. Recruiter is just simply somebody who encourages new people to join a group or take an action. Recruiter's really main goal was to try to convince and get people, settlers, immigrants, to come to Minnesota. In other words, they were trying to get the word out that Minnesota was this fantastic place to come. Look at the beautiful scenery. Look at how gorgeous this is. And really, what they were trying to do is get people to move to Minnesota because Minnesota needed to get their population to a certain level in order to get to that next step of becoming a state. Okay. Constitution is simply a written document outlining how the government of a state or a country is organized. Yes, we do have a constitution for Minnesota, Minnesota's constitution, and of course there is the US Constitution as well. Federalism, a very difficult, challenging word. Okay, it's a system of government in which power is divided between a federal or national governments and various state governments. In other words, what federalism does is it kind of balances out the power between the government at the US level, the ones that you think about in Washington, D.C., versus the state governments like Minnesota state government. And so, yes, the national government, the federal government in Washington, D.C., they have a role, right, to make sure that there are certain laws in place for all US citizens. And there are also laws within the state of Minnesota that apply only to people in Minnesota. And that's the final definition. I want to focus for the few final minutes of this video on a couple of things. One is, okay, you should have used recruiter, immigrant, and steamboat in a sentence and make sure that it is typed or written in the context of Minnesota newcomers. So here's what I came up with. Many immigrants arrived in the Minnesota Territory by steamboat as recruiters encouraged these immigrants to enjoy Minnesota's beautiful scenery. And so again, these recruiters were trying to convince people, immigrants, for example, to come and live in Minnesota when it was first a territory as it was moving forward to wanting to become a state. Okay. The last thing I wanted to point out is if we were to look at the two terms state and U.S. Congress, the sentence I created was in 1849, the U.S. Congress passed a law establishing Minnesota as a territory. Again, in both of my sentences, I just want to point out that one, it starts with a capital letter. Two, it ends with a period. And you'll notice that I used the terms, the two state and U.S. Congress in this sentence, and recruiter, immigrant, and steamboat. I used those three terms in one sentence only. I didn't have three separate sentences for each of those terms. So make sure that you only type, okay, one sentence for the grouping of terms. And if we take a peek at the second page, remember the last three sentences, you decided which vocabulary terms to group and then you created your own sentences and making sure that it was typed or written in the context of the chapter. So in total, you had 5 sentences to write. If you at all have any questions about any of these terms, okay, maybe that you don't understand, feel free to always contact me or reach out to your HOA teacher. And before I let you go for the day, I just want to point out one final thing, okay? Make certain that you complete each of these learning activities in numerical order. Ultimately, you will need to complete number 5 and number 6 in Schoology, and you can obviously do that by just clicking on the date, and then you can see, maybe not, there you go. We can see those 2 assessments. All right. Thank you for your time. Take care and have a fantastic day.